again, everybody. Time for another Silver Bullets podcast. I am Michael Citro.
And I'm Chip Minnich.
Chip, how you feeling, my friend? It was not our week.
No, it was not. And feeling like 1995, and I can explain that later for those of you that reference may go over your head.
Yeah. You and we did not pick the score correctly.
Not even close.
In our predictions, you had 42-21 Ohio State. I was a little more conservative, thinking a little closer game, 34-26, but I also picked Ohio State. And I kind of thought that Ohio State couldn't lose this game unless kind of everything went against it. And I thought that might include the turnover battle, but that didn't happen. But the first domino was the weather. And when I saw what the weather was doing, I immediately thought this is going to be a closer game than it probably should be.
No, that's a good point. No, give credit to Michigan. I mean, this was not a fluke. I know we're going to talk about the game, but I mean, they outplayed, outcoached, out everything Ohio State, and it's very painful to admit that, especially since you and I have the advantage of knowing, for example, what it was like during the 1990s. To be on, just the perpetually frustrated side of this rivalry. So I certainly understand the jubilation that was seen on the field post game up in Ann Arbor.
Yeah, you and I are actually older than that because we're old enough to remember when the series was more or less a coin flip every year.
Oh yeah. I mean, one of my earliest and fondest memories of the rivalry, I can still picture Von Brodnax delivering a great block up in Ann Arbor that allowed Art Schlichter to score a touchdown, to clinch a victory up there in 1981. So that's one of my earliest memories of the game. But you're right. I mean, we can remember when it was a coin flip, and that's the thing. Like Earl Bruce. He was fired even with a winning record against that team up north.
Yeah.
And then, 1988 through 2000, it was, you want to talk about, it was, far from a coin flip. I mean, it was just dread and misery for most of that time period.
Yeah, I remember that last season for Earl Bruce quite well because I was in Ann Arbor for his last game. And that was a mediocre Ohio State team that won on the visitors' home field. So it was it used to be the proverbial throw out the records game. Anybody could win this game, throw out the records. It doesn't matter if one team's having a down year; they can certainly rise to the occasion. And in this case, the teams came in with the same record, but it didn't feel like the same level of competition and accomplishment, given that Michigan struggled mightily with Rutgers. They needed a late comeback to beat Penn State. It was not. It was also a Nebraska game where they were in a little bit more danger than Ohio State was against Nebraska. So if you looked at common opponents and that kind of thing, it definitely looked like it was going to be sort of more of the same, as long as Ohio State didn't basically shoot themselves in the foot. And that's always a possibility in the big game, especially when you have a first-year starter in the big game like Ohio State did. And in this case, I just think there were a number of things that kind of came together. And you're right, you can't take anything away from Michigan. They outplayed Ohio State. They had a good game plan that they were able to execute. If you had asked me before the game, based on what we've seen recently, will Michigan run all over that defense? I would have said, no, of course not. This team basically shut down the best running back in the country and made him a non-factor so much that his coach just put him on the sideline. This was a defense that had been playing better, and especially in the run game, and not giving up big plays. And their trouble still seemed to be those middle crossing routes and slants in the passing game. They didn't seem to have the kinds of trouble against the types of plays that you knew Michigan would throw at them. and they did have trouble all day with it. And I think a lot of it was there was nobody getting off blocks, and that to me speaks to how badly Michigan players wanted this game relative to how badly Ohio State players wanted this game. And I think there's a little human nature involved there because this has been very lopsided for a while. And also, Ohio State just played the number 7 team in the country that beat this team and really just destroyed Michigan State. I thought that the Michigan State game being that easy might not be a good thing entering the game.
Well, what you said previously, I think, you can't understate it. And when you said about being up in Ann Arbor in 1987 for Earl Bruce's last game as Ohio State's head coach, the power of, the emotion of the game. And, in 1987, that was a mediocre Ohio State team that played with a lot of heart and emotion in their coach's final game and pulled off the upset. Compare and contrast that to, what we all as Ohio State fans witnessed with, up in Ann Arbor this past Saturday. And you're right. Michigan played with more heart, more fire, more intensity, everything. And I think you're onto something there when you say that the ease with which Ohio State defeated Michigan State probably played a part in it. Something that I don't want to, because it sounds like excuses, and that's the last thing in the world I want, is the fact that there were so few players on Ohio State's roster who actually were a part of the Ohio State-Michigan game in previous contests. For example, like, Chris Olave, obviously, he had been, but, when you look at, so many key contributors on Ohio State's team, that this was their first time, like this, like with everything last year, and kind of, this kind of something that, what you said kind of spurred me into thinking this is leading up to the game, just enjoying, like the week and, all the different things. I had an opportunity to listen to an interview by a local Cleveland sportscaster, interview former Ohio State head coach Jim Tressel. And, when asked about the games that he remembered without, like he said, without a doubt, he remembered that 2003 loss. And one of the things that Coach Tressel said, and it just kind of something, maybe you disagree and that's okay, but something that Coach Tressel said is a part of him thinks that a lot of the team, because going into that game, there was kind of like this talk about, if Ohio State defeats Michigan, they're going to possibly be playing for the national championship, because that was back in the BCS era, like being, like in the top 2. And Coach Tressel kind of said, part of me wonders if there was maybe, some focus on that versus focusing on the game itself, like making, like the intensity, the emotion, everything of that. And the reason I'm just bringing this up is maybe there was some of that too, for Ohio State, that, like kind of like, okay, like already thinking about the Big Ten championship and the playoffs. You know what I mean? I don't want it to sound like
no, absolutely. I don't. I think that they're human beings, and that goes into it, especially when you consider the week before the College Football Playoff Committee jumped Ohio State over Alabama. That's that was always going to play into it at some level. I mean, to what degree we will never know.
Right. And that's why, like I said, it's like it was like the frustration of how everything came about. It's I maybe you have I just referenced the 2003 game, and obviously like 2011, that was a more recent loss. But to me, like when it comes to like just the emotions and the kind of the painful flashback memories of losing to that team, to me, this seemed eerily similar to 1995. But maybe you have a different perspective, which is entirely fine.
No, I don't I don't have a different perspective. I have a different perspective in that I'm a different person, but I mean, it's you and I grew up, in basically the same era, the same experiences with this rivalry with Ohio State football. And this did seem like a team that had some struggles early on in the season and was getting better, this Ohio State team. It certainly seemed like it was getting better towards the end of the season after the Penn State and Nebraska games. It seemed like things were starting to turn a corner and they were like done messing around and they had fixed some of the problems. And then we saw everything come back in this game. It started right off the bat with the first drive. Michigan gets the ball first. They go down the field, largely running toward the boundary. And then, of course, that was very well schemed because that set up, because of the success they had running into the boundary, they were able to set up the little bit of misdirection play to score the touchdown.
Yes. And again, just very ominous. I mean, just very ominous that, we talked about last week, again, kind of maybe, I don't want to say, I don't want to speak on your behalf, but, kind of, I guess where I felt confident was, okay, well, Michigan is making no secret. Like they are going to run the ball. Like they are going to run the ball continually. And the mere fact that, as you said, that opening drive that, okay, they did exactly as we thought that they would. And Ohio State did nothing to, I mean, seriously, like they did nothing to counteract that the entire first, I mean, not only first series, but like that first half was just, I kept wondering like, okay, they're going to do something to, like the defensive line and the linebackers, they're going to start playing better, obviously, because they're making no secret about what they are going to be doing with their offensive game plan.
Right. The first drive didn't really bother me as much because I knew Michigan was going to come out with a motion. You knew that they're going to have their plays scripted. They were going to come out with their, what their game plan was. They were going to come out and try to do their thing. And they felt good about their opening drive, play calling, and all of that stuff. And they had some success with it. There weren't a lot of big gash plays, but there were just enough plays to where they kept moving the ball and they get their touchdown. And then you think, all right, Ohio State knew they were going to have to take that first shot. They're going to have to deal with the emotion of the game, and they're going to have to make some adjustments, and they have been good at doing that. Then Ohio State goes down the field and ends up having to kick a field goal because Chris Olave dropped a pass in the end zone. It wasn't an easy pass, but it still is something that Chris Olave, 99 times out of 100, he catches it. And that maybe cold ball, a little windy. I'm not making an excuse for him. Only he knows why he dropped it, but it was a tough catch. But he normally makes that catch. He didn't make it, and then you get your false start penalty, and the false start penalties, the pre-snap penalties they've been a problem for a while now. And some games you only have a couple, other games you have a ton of them, and this was a game where they had way too many.
Yeah, and I'm just going to ask. I'm asking. I'm not, I don't want to sound like, okay, that this is something that Ryan Day, should be, hung out to dry on this one. But after the game, CJ Stroud, I guess, and it's okay. Like, I understand, like, I guess last week was not well, like he was sick and wasn't feeling well. And he basically said that he, in terms of like his voice, like he almost lost it. Here was the question I was going to ask is, would you have possibly, I guess like during the week, okay, I realize that their offense is predominantly, from the shotgun, maybe put CJ Stroud under center more, like with the crowd noise, you know what I'm saying? Like to kind of help with those false start penalties. Cause to me, like that's kind of where a part of me was like, wasn't until after the game that I thought, well, why didn't they, if that's true, and I'm not downing CJ Stroud, I'm just kind of wondering, it's like, maybe go under center more, maybe that would have helped. I'm asking.
I don't know that that's the case because, I wouldn't have done it because I don't think that that's how they operate. Don't they he claps and they have a certain cadence to what, when he's clapping and that's when the snap comes? I think you just wait for the clap, don't you?
I would think so, but I'm just making the point that like last week, you know what I mean? Like if all right, CJ it's going to be loud. You're going to have to really bark it out. And he's saying, he's he's having difficulty with his voice.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
I just don't think it was a voice thing. If he's clapping, what does that have to do with his voice?
okay. No, good point.
And the
yeah.
other part of that is there's also a silent snap count that they can go to. You see a lot of times where the guard will like tap the center, and then the center will snap when he's ready. A lot of
Yep.
teams do that. You've seen teams do that, and
Sure.
teams will often bring that out in a hostile environment to avoid that.
Exactly.
But the bottom line is nobody should go before the center goes, and everybody should know when the center goes. It's and a lot of the time, which is the most maddening thing, it's not even alignment. It's a wide receiver.
Yeah.
And they should be just on the line, looking down the line at the football. And if the football doesn't move, you don't move. It's very frustrating. I don't know how you can coach guys out of that once they are doing it. Maybe it was nerves. Maybe they got into a game that was a little more physical than they had bargained for. The elements and the environment weren't what they were used to because they haven't been to Ann Arbor in a couple of years, and like you said, a lot of these players have never played in Ann Arbor.
Right. And,
so,
I mean, you've been there. I haven't.
Yeah.
And I am going to make, and like the point that prior to the game, and this is because I know you're on social media just like I am. Like a lot of people were saying, this seems like this crowd is really into it, and a lot of times, like that's one of the things that a lot of people kind of ridicule Michigan fans, like, like they're not really into the game, like that these guys were, that they were actually ready, to be loud and to be raucous and to be disruptive. And
it's
like
been a few years.
Psychologically, it could have been, CJ Stroud, like you said, hasn't had, well, for one thing, like you said, a lot more intimidating of an environment, and he certainly didn't have to face, two defensive ends that were more disruptive than Ojabo and Aiden Hutchinson.
Right.
And the entire season.
Yeah, it was louder than it has been in recent years, but Michigan hasn't been as good in recent years, and that's just it's just par for the course. Is if the team's fans know that we win this game, we go to the Big Ten championship game. The West isn't very good this year. We have a really good chance to make the college football playoff, and now I fully expect, because Wisconsin lost, I fully expect Michigan to make it to the college football playoff. And why wouldn't you show up and be loud and be intimidating? And they had a lot, like I said, they had a lot of factors on their side. They had the weather they needed because they're a team that the weather doesn't affect what they do. And usually it doesn't for Ohio State because they usually have a good run game. I don't think they were always consistent with how they approached the run game in this particular game. And they throw the ball a lot. And when you throw the ball a lot, and you've been talking about it, when the weather turns bad, you have to be able to turn to your power run game. And I think that they could have done a little better job of running early on in the game, but once the score got in Michigan's favor, it became an uphill climb, and they had to throw the ball more. So, It like I said, there were a lot of things that worked in Michigan's favor in this game. Now that's not to say that they were given or gifted anything. They put those things in their favor. A lot of them, some of those things are out of your control. But there were a lot of nerves in this game from the get go. You give up the touchdown, and then you have a brain fart on the next kickoff, and you're starting deep in your own end. Then you get a false start on your wide receiver, who's a senior and knows better, and then you're starting real deep in your end zone or in your own end, and then you end up having to punt the ball away, and they get the ball in good field position. Luckily, there was a turnover, and Ohio State was actually able to come away with better field position, go down, kick the field goal, which should have been a touchdown, and the real job for Ohio State was always to worry Michigan and to make them nervous at the end, make them the team that was nervous at the end. And it never was able to happen. I mean, if you had told me that any group of players would play this hard for Jim Harbaugh, I wouldn't have believed you because he just doesn't seem that inspirational to me. He's been a little bit of a goofball. We've talked about it, many times here on the podcast, is the sleepovers, the climbing a tree, and that kind of the weird things that he says. But he had a 7-3 lead after the first quarter, but it wasn't any panic time. Ohio State was getting stops on defense at this point in the game. And then Ohio State took the lead in the second quarter on a 25-yard pass from Stroud to Wilson, and Michigan then answered, because what has Ohio State's defense done this year a lot of times is when the offense scores, you give that score right back. That's been the one thing, is that they haven't bowed their backs and protected a lead very well this season in in some of these games, and that's why these games have stayed close. You need to get the ball back to your offense, and the offense was off the field while the Michigan offense was methodically going down the field. They make it 14-10. Ohio State is able to score another field goal at the end, and again having to settle for another field goal. And it's 14-13 at the break. And on the road, 14-13, you're thinking that's not bad. This is not the first time the team has trailed at halftime this year.
No, and true confession for Chip Minnich here is, at this point, I'm with you. I'm not feeling worried. I'm frustrated. I'm not thinking like, oh, we're done. This is whatever. I'm more of, all right, the first half has gone as poorly as it could be, and Ohio State's only down a point. And here's I guess you could say, like, the Ohio State optimist side in me is halftime adjustments are going to be made, and Ohio State gets the ball in the first half. And what's going to happen is they're going to get the ball, they're going to drive down the field, they're going to score a touchdown. And psychologically, here's, like I said, I know I'm really reaching here, but it's like psychologically, I'm thinking this is going to cause Michigan to start to deviate from their game plan, because they're going to be behind from more than with a touchdown. You know what I mean? Like, they're going to like
right.
a field goal. Like, they're going to have to start throwing the ball more, which they don't want to do. They've already been picked off once. Well, that's like all these thoughts that are running through my mind during halftime. I'm thinking, okay, we're okay.
Yeah.
And then obviously Ohio State did none of those things to start off the second half.
Yeah.
And I'm still not thinking we're done, but I'm thinking, oh crap. Like, this is like what you absolutely did not need. You needed Ohio State to come out and assert themselves, which they failed to do.
Right. They come out to get the ball to start the second half, and you get a good run on first down by Henderson. You get a decent run on second down. You set up third and short, and they go with their quick. And I don't know what it is. Sometimes when they go quick, they just don't get the job done up front, and that was the case on this. It was third and short. They decided to go quick. They pull everybody in. They don't have the defense spread out, and they give the ball, and it's stopped. And you go 3 and out on your first possession. And that, to me, was the first real oh crap moment of the game.
Yes. Yeah. No, you're right. I mean, it was definitely, because it's all right. Everything I had said a few moments ago, like, psychologically, it's like, okay, this is your chance to put some doubt in them.
Right. Make them nervous. Make those ghosts come back.
Yeah.
The ghosts of the last 8 years would have been all resurfacing, and it's not really all the players. You want Harbaugh to panic.
Right.
He's the one that's shown the ability to call ridiculous plays and do really weird things and get away from his game plan when you put the pressure on him. He didn't in this case, but he didn't have to, because of that 3 and out. Ohio State gives the ball back. They come back down and score. They couldn't stop Hassan Haskins, and they mostly couldn't stop him because Michigan stayed ahead of the chains. Even when Ohio State made a good first down play defensively, Michigan would find a way to get 6 or 7 or 8 yards on second down.
Right.
And that's Hassan Haskins' time. You're going to give it to him once, and if he doesn't make it, you're going to give it to him again.
Right. Like, what I was going to say is, you've heard me say this before, like, ideally, like, on first down, if you're running the ball, if you can be at 2nd and 4, and I'm thinking just in a generic sense, is that's an ideal situation, because you're I don't care who you're talking about, that by and large, like your whole playbook is open to you. You can run it again. You can,
Mm-hmm.
throw. And like you said, they never, ever were behind, like they were never, ever behind the sticks in terms of like there were no tackles for loss
No.
the entire game. There were, I
Nope.
mean, no, zero tackles for loss, zero sacks. I mean, it was just, in terms of, the whole defensive game plan. Like I said, it is certainly one of these things where, going into the second half, as I said, it's like, okay, well, they're not going to deviate from their game plan unless they're forced to.
Mm-hmm.
And so especially when they've got a lead, are you kidding me? Like, yeah, they're going to run it more because
Yeah.
they want to burn the clock. They want to, tire out that defense by pounding on them. So yeah, I mean, that's when, it's like as the game progressed, just the feelings of just helplessness started to kind of enter my thoughts more and more, unfortunately.
Yeah. So then it was an 8-point deficit, and then Ohio State again had to give the ball back, and they came down and scored again, and that's the second real oh crap moment. It's like, damn, we're down 2 scores on the road. This isn't good. Ohio State did respond early in the fourth quarter. Travion Henderson with a 1-yard run to cut it back to 8, but then again, right down the field, 66 yards. They gave up a good kick return. The last couple kickoffs were short and not covered well. Not sure how much the wind or anything had to do with that, but they weren't as good as the kicks earlier in the game, and they only had to go 66 yards. They did it in 9 plays, took 5 minutes off the clock, restored two touchdown lead. Ohio State came back down, scored again with 4:45 remaining, and then again they just couldn't stop it and get the ball back, and Haskins tacked on a late touchdown when Ohio State basically said, "Okay, we're screwed, and there's no way to get the ball back unless we let them score." And they just, I've never seen Ohio State do that, just kind of
Right.
stand up and just let the guy walk into the end zone like that. But that's what it was, and that's the end, 42-27, as Ohio State unable to convert. I think they ended up getting a penalty and a sack or something on the last drive, and it was probably too late at that point to spark a rally anyway. But it was there was really a failure on every level of the defense. I would say I'm most disappointed in defensive line play. There were several
Mm-hmm.
plays where I saw Haskell Garrett decided to come back for his senior year. Didn't play Michigan last year because they pulled out of the game. I don't know how many times I saw him just absolutely manhandled by one guy, and that should not be Haskell Garrett.
I agree. I agree. I mean, and I'm not sure if you had the opportunity to read it, and I'm, certainly encouraging any of our listeners, if they haven't, Tony Gerdeman's, what I think, article series on BuckeyeScoop.com. And I want to make this abundantly clear to you and to anyone, I am not suggesting getting rid of Larry Johnson by any stretch, but I think Gerd made a really good point when he said, hey, if the defensive line coach, this was Jim Smith, would we be singing his praises? Like this, like you said, the defensive line, that falls on Larry Johnson.
Yeah.
I mean, as phenomenal of a coach as he is, I mean, like the fact that, as you said, Haskell Garrett getting blown off the ball, just the whole defensive game plan, certainly it's going to be interesting to see what direction that they go this offseason.
And the thing, too, is when your defensive line is getting pushed around like that without even being double teamed, offensive line gets to the second level, and then your linebackers are useless. It really means that your safeties have to make all the plays, and your corners, they have to come in and make the plays, because your linebackers are getting blocked by much, much bigger men because they're not being kept clean by the defensive line. And then sometimes they're gambling and they're choosing the wrong direction to go. And then Haskins turns a 3-yard gain into a 12-yard gain.
Correct. I mean, yeah. I mean, like I said, it's like the whole unit
Yeah.
is going to be, I mean, I know I just said, that article, but, Gerd raises some interesting points, in terms of, all right, like Ryan Day is very supposedly adamant about the defensive scheme that he wants, but he may, in terms of, all right, is he going to, if there is an overhaul of the coaching staff, is he going to let the defensive coach come in and run the scheme that he wants versus, what Ryan Day wants? I mean, it's because it just, like you said, it's like the linebackers were being engulfed by the offensive linemen because the defensive linemen were getting blown off the line of scrimmage. That's why, it's like, I guess, when I think back to 1995, as painful as that was, it reminded me, like the end result was a similar thing where it's like, okay, they ran all over Ohio State, and then the end result was, like in that case, Ohio State got knocked out of the Rose Bowl. Mm-hmm. But in this case here, like Ohio State, they got knocked out of the Big Ten championship in the college football playoff.
Might have got knocked into the Rose Bowl.
They might get knocked into the Rose Bowl. You're right. I mean, like it's a weird thing, and my family and I, we were talking about it on Saturday night. And here's the thing: is like, you and I, we grew up. Most people like, oh God, like the Rose Bowl was the ultimate goal.
Yeah.
Now with the college football playoff, it's the kind of thing where it's like, okay, the Rose Bowl. Like I'll certainly watch it. If that's, no mistake about that. But I'm going to be kind of curious if it does wind up being the Rose Bowl, mm-hmm. how many Ohio State fans actually go? And, here's another thing: how many Ohio State players are going to opt out when you're not involved in the college football playoff?
Right.
I mean, those are legitimate questions that, we might have seen the last of Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson and. Now you mentioned Haskell Garrett. I think it would probably behoove him to try and improve.
Don't let that be the last thing people see on tape. Yeah. No, you're right. You're right. Because the Rose Bowl right now, it's a damn fine bowl game, and it speaks to the level where Ohio State has been for the last decade that we would even consider this a whatever game. Yes. But it has become that for Ohio State fans, whereas a Wisconsin, a Minnesota, a Northwestern would love to go play in the Rose Bowl.
Yes, absolutely. And that's I heard somebody suggesting, hey, Michigan State, they would probably travel well, because they haven't been, in a bowl game in a few years. Mm-hmm. And somebody made the counterpoint. Well, listen, when you're the Rose Bowl, you want to make sure that you're going to have eyeballs on the television set. Mm-hmm. And Ohio State always does well in the ratings. So yeah, it's going to be interesting to see next Sunday when they announce the bowl destinations.
Yeah. All right. I probably have a few more things to discuss about the game, but before we do that, why don't we take a quick break?
Yep.
We'll get right back to it right after this. All right, we are back, and just to kind of finish up the game here, Ohio State actually they had one fewer first down than Michigan in this game. The yards rushing obviously is the huge thing that you look at. The net yards rushing, 297 to 64. And that's a huge difference. I never would have thought that Michigan was capable of putting up that kind of rushing yardage on this defense. The way the interior defensive line has played this year, and the way that they've corrected things in the linebacker, in the second and third levels of the defense, it just didn't seem possible to me.
I know. I mean, again, you referenced it earlier, and I completely agree with you. It's like, okay, you saw how effective that Ohio State was at shutting down Michigan State the week previous. You never ever. I mean, like I always thought, as you said, like that first drive, Michigan's going to come out with a lot of emotion. I never ever thought, oh, they're going to completely shut them down. But I really did think eventually that improved, or what we perceived to be improved, Ohio State defensive line and linebacker core was going to hamper that Michigan running game, and it just never ever came close.
Yeah. Passing yardage, Ohio State had 394 to 190 for Michigan, and a couple of drops prevented C.J. Stroud from having another 400-yard game.
Yeah, I mean, any fan who blames C.J. Stroud for the performance on Saturday, I mean, go back and look. Like he was under pressure. Was behind the chains in terms of, like you said, with like numerous false starts. He played extremely well. I mean, if anything, like you said, like some drops prevented him from that 400-yard threshold, but he certainly played well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he was hit, he was pressured, he was sacked 4 times, didn't throw an interception. He was 34 of 49. That's a pretty good percentage, 394 yards, and a couple of touchdowns. I mean, I can't fault C.J. Stroud for this game at all.
No, not at all. I mean, if anything, if there were bright spots, C.J. Stroud definitely was one of them.
Mm-hmm.
In a day that Ohio State fans certainly, were very frustrated and disappointed with the end result. C.J. Stroud certainly was one of those few bright spots that we saw in Ann Arbor.
If you ask me, if I were given the power to grade out the champions this week, he might be the only one on Ohio State.
That would be legit. I would agree with that. I mean, it's a team game. You win, you lose as a team. But yeah, C.J. Stroud definitely would be the only one that you could say came ready to play, based on the circumstances that we saw. Like you said, under pressure, being sacked, didn't turn the ball over. I mean, he played as well as you could possibly expect him to.
Yeah. I might grade out TreVeyon Henderson as a champion. He had 17 carries for 74 yards and a touchdown. Also had 5 catches for 54 yards and a touchdown. I think in what he was given to do in this game, I thought TreVeyon Henderson played well.
He did. I just wish, kind of where, what you had mentioned earlier, and I agree with, is I wish Ohio State had done a better job establishing the run. Like kind of what I had hoped the game plan would have eventually have become, in the second half, where Ohio State has the lead and they're trying to do exactly what Michigan did to Ohio State. You're just trying to burn the clock by running the ball effectively. Ohio State just never really was able to do it running the ball, but TreVeyon Henderson, I thought, played extremely well. It just seemed as though that the game plan just never really came to fruition offensively.
Yeah. On the other side, Hassan Haskins had 169 yards rushing on 28 attempts, 5 touchdowns.
Yes.
It was you knew you were going to get a steady diet of him. You got a steady diet of him. And, they sprinkled in some Blake Corum. Blake Corum was mostly contained, but he did break a long one that kind of helped his numbers. He broke a 55-yard run on, again, one of those plays where the linebacker chooses one way, and it wasn't the right way to try to avoid that blocker get to the second level. I didn't particularly care for anything, having to do with that, so I'll move on. The receiving core did what the receiving core usually does. Jackson Smith and Jigba with a big game, 11 catches on 12 targets. Did not get in the end zone, but he had 127 yards. Garrett Wilson, 10 catches, 119 and a touchdown. Chris Olave did not get in the end zone. He caught 7 balls. He was targeted 13 times. He 7 catches for 88 yards. Used a little bit more as a possession guy at times in this game. It seemed at times that Ohio State had what it wanted offensively, and if it could just protect. It didn't do a good job of protecting, and the offensive line, they've got a lot of soul searching to do, because this was supposed to be the strength of the team, and they've played. I mean, we just talked about the Purdue game. Karlaftis was not a factor at all in that game, and I realized that Michigan has 2 very good defensive ends, but they didn't either of the tackles cover themselves in glory on Saturday.
No, they didn't. And something else that you have raised a point of during the season that I think bears mentioning as it relates to this game, when you look back on it, is that when Ohio State had to reshuffle the offensive line with DeJuan Jones going out, and then, okay, so let's move Nicholas Petit-Frere back over to right, tackle, Thayer Munford back to left tackle. The insertion of Matthew Jones at guard in the second half. Now, granted, I mean, the end result, Ohio State, in terms of, kind of what we've already mentioned, like they were behind, so like they couldn't run the ball. I think you're onto something about possibly like, okay, I know it seems, the all tackle offensive line might seem good in theory, but I think having some guards who can really help push that interior opponent interior defensive line of the opposition. Mm-hmm. That might be something like, okay, Matthew Jones might be in line for a starting guard spot, maybe, I know Donovan Jackson's a true freshman, but I know he got some playing time. Like maybe seeing in the spring, for 2022, getting away from this all tackle look, mm-hmm. and getting back to more of a traditional offensive line, especially when you need to really maul the opposing defensive line with the running game.
Yeah, there's a few things about having so many tackles. I don't think the pulling is as good. I think there have to be guys on your offensive line that are quick, not just big, mm-hmm. and can manhandle guys and be in their way. Some defensive players are just quick, and you need that guard quickness, I think, at some positions. I think you're right. Maybe if this had been a case of having to put in another guard and move Petit-Frere to right tackle, maybe that would have helped. DeJuan Jones is an extremely good run blocker at right tackle. He has struggled at times with quickness, in pass protection, and he did in this game. And he also had some penalties that didn't help. And we can't really talk about the offensive line without talking about some huge mistakes by Luke Whippler in this game.
Yes.
Right. He had a snap when CJ wasn't ready. He rolled a snap back there once. I mean, it was just it was not his best game either. It seemed like a lot of guys had their not best games all at the wrong time.
Yeah. I mean, and I'm not sure if you've seen it, but Dane Brugler, who is one of the best NFL draft analysts out there, has on Twitter a clip of, I feel for him. I think it's, Aiden Hutchinson. I know it's Aiden Hutchinson against, I believe it was Nicholas Petit-Frere. I mean, he just quite literally just blasts him, and, like Petit-Frere lands on his back. Mm-hmm. It's just a clip of that. Like you said, of all the games to have people not playing at their best. I mean, it was just, kind of, at the worst possible time.
Mm-hmm. I don't know if he was sick or nursing an injury, but I have seen online that Tyleik Williams played 2 snaps in this game.
I'm glad you, Brent, brought that up, because I was wondering why he wasn't in there. Because you want to talk about now, I don't want to put a lot of pressure on a true freshman defensive lineman, but he certainly seemed like he would be the kind of guy that would have been very formidable against that offensive line in terms of not necessarily stopping, but helping to clog the running game for Hassan Haskins.
Yes.
And, that's so, yeah, and that's the thing. It's like the frustration from Ohio State fans. Okay, well, why didn't this guy play? Why didn't we do this? That's kind of what a game like this is gonna. You've got a whole off season of this.
Right.
And deservedly so.
You're not going to lose the locker room if you bench a senior in the game when you're getting mauled. If
right.
you put in Tyleik Williams and the job's getting done, because the team ultimately they want to win.
Right.
So if you have to sit Jerron Cage, or you have to sit Teron Vincent or Haskell Garrett even to give or Antoine Jackson to give Tyleik Williams more snaps, if it's successful, let him do it. He played 2 snaps, Chip. He had a tackle. That's 1 for 2. That's a pretty good percentage.
Oh yeah, like I said, it's like I really thought that they would have, in terms of just their game plan, that they are going to run the ball. How this was just, so manifestly, you know, mismanaged. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
it's, and here's another term that, and I don't know if you ever watch Big Ten Today. It was on, with Howard Griffith, and he used a four-letter word that I'm hoping that um, the Ohio State, just the coaches as well as the players, that they hear how he described what he saw. He referred to them as soft.
Soft, yeah. I mean, that was my
And
thought throughout the game is that you guys can play better than this. We've seen it, and you're not doing it. Like, even Alabama
right,
didn't run on this defense like Michigan did.
right. That's why I said it evoked those painful
Yeah.
memories of '95.
So,
Like when you're talking nearly 300 yards rushing.
mhm.
That's what That's why my painful memory went back to that dreadful time.
Let's look at the defensive tackles real quick. Haskell Garrett played 35 snaps. Chip, he had one tackle.
Ugh.
An assist. He had one assisted tackle in 35 snaps. Jerron Cage played 28 snaps. He had one assist. Teron Vincent played 28 snaps. He had one solo tackle. Antoine Jackson, 15 snaps. And Antoine Jackson had one assist. So that means all of these guys who got all of these snaps had either one assist or one solo tackle. Tyleik Williams had two snaps, Chip. One, and he had assist.
There you go.
I get wanting to play your more experienced players. And again, maybe Tyleik Williams was a little ill. Maybe he was sick. Maybe he got hurt. I don't know. But he played two snaps in this game, and this game was screaming for somebody of his size and quickness and power to be in the middle of that line.
Yeah, I mean, the stats don't lie. So, like you said, I think it definitely is the kind of thing where those are going to be legitimate questions to be asked.
Yeah.
I don't know when. Ryan Day obviously is not going to have his typical weekday press conference because, as I understand it, I think the coaching staff, since there is no game to be played this coming Saturday that Ohio State fans have grown accustomed to watching and attending,
Yeah.
I think the coaching staff is out on the road recruiting. But that would be a legitimate. I mean, like if you could ask that question. Okay, was there any reason why Tyleik Williams didn't play more?
Yeah.
In light of when you look at the performance that he gave compared to the other defensive linemen.
Yeah. Well, let's get to our picks to click.
Yep.
This is ugly.
Oh,
I'm not
none of
giving our defenders any
Nothing.
clicks because you took Garrett, I took Steel Chambers. Steel Chambers was third on the team in tackles with 6, but every level of that defense got abused. He did have a quarterback hurry that forced a throwaway from Cade McNamara early in the game, but yeah, for me, nobody was good enough to say they clicked defensively. And offensively, I took Chris Olave. I would not say he clicked. He had a couple of drops in this game and did not score. It is so weird to see him targeted 13 times, only have 7 catches, even though a lot of the throwaways were just like, oh, I got to get rid of it. I know Olave's over there somewhere, kind of thing.
Yeah.
But you took Jeremy Ruckert. He had one catch for no yards, and this floored me because I thought this screamed Jeremy Ruckert game.
Yeah, that's why I picked him. I mean, that's why I just grunted in exasperation.
Yeah.
It's like, everything about this, just, I don't care what side of the ball. I think Ross Fulton, put it best. It's like if you can't run and you can't stop the run, it just made for just a long day.
Yeah.
Offensively, defensively. I mean, you touched on the special teams. I mean, like I'm not sure if it was you. I'll gladly credit you if it was, but somebody on social media was like, okay, I think the Julian Fleming experiment at kickoff returns needs to stop.
Yeah, I did say I'd seen
That
enough of Julian Fleming on
okay, yeah.
kickoffs.
I mean, I completely agree with you. I mean, there's another question. Why were okay? What happened to Emeka Egbuka? I mean, not that I know that Julian Fleming's a talented young man, but it's like, why are you in the biggest game of the year when you had a guy that was on the verge, seemingly, of breaking, a kickoff for a touchdown? Okay, like is Egbuka hurt? I mean, I just don't know. And
Yeah.
that's why I mean, like, it just seemed odd that they put Fleming back there in such a big game.
Well, Buka didn't play against Michigan State, and they said he
Right.
was hurt, but they didn't say. He said it wasn't a long-term thing, but I don't think he participated. I think he was not on the available. I think he was on the availability report as being unavailable, if I recall.
Okay.
So I don't think I don't see him on the participation sheet of the stats. So I think he's still hurt. And so, but the problem is, you've got to have someone that can do it. Fleming botched one last week, and he managed to recover it, but it was bad field position. He botched two of them this week. After the second one, 2 weeks in a row, I think maybe you try someone else back there. Certainly, they would have had his backup, practice that position all week. It would be like, okay, we know we're not going to have Egbuka, so we've got to have Fleming. We got to have a backup. So
Right.
maybe the backup gets a chance here. Maybe it's, I don't know, Marvin Harrison or Ballard or somebody.
Yeah. I mean, because I realize it's not an easy position to play. But I mean, I guess, it's one of these things where it's like, okay, like most teams have kind of recognized the fact that, okay, well, like with the kickoffs, that it's kind of now, like you want to fair catch and just take the ball at the 25.
Yeah.
Like that's
Most of the time,
most of the time.
And to the ones that he botched, he called fair catch but didn't go catch them.
That's what I mean. I mean, it just oh.
What happened to the day? Do you remember? It wasn't that long ago when often it would be a defensive back that was returning kickoffs and punts.
Right.
And I think Cameron Martinez would be the perfect kick returner.
You're absolutely right. I mean, again, legitimately good questions that I wish that we would be able to ask. Like, okay, Egbuka's hurt. Can you go through the process of, all right, if Fleming was like, who's the backup? Was there ever any thought of playing the backup? Have you ever thought about Martinez? Like all these, like legitimately, it's like, okay, what just basically, it's kind of like, what were you thinking?
There are certain guys you have to get on the field, and I feel like if they're athletes and they're capable of playing either side of the ball, like a Cam Martinez, then that's a great place to have them contribute early and often. There just seems to be a forcing of Julian Fleming into this, and it doesn't seem like he has ever earned it. Like he has never shown that he is the fourth wide receiver on this team. Yeah, he caught a touchdown against Michigan State. We joked about the earth, wind, fire, and now water. But, I mean, he's really done very little in his career to date. And, it's maddening when a guy like Jameson Williams leaves and Julian Fleming is like the next guy up and he's just not performing.
Right. I mean, we mentioned it earlier. There's a legitimately good possibility that Julian Fleming and hopefully Emeka Egbuka will be fine. But by the bowl game, we may see a lot of them because, like Jackson Smith and Jigba. I mean, that if there's a comfort I would think for CJ Stroud is, all right, he's coming back. I mean, he's got one more year, but there's going to be a lot of players, in this bowl game, who, on offense and defense, who are going to, a player that may be sitting out, a player that I know has been unavailable that I'm hoping is giving strong consideration to coming back. Sevyn Banks, it's like, he did not play well earlier in the year, and he was injured. And it's like in preseason, it was like, okay, like NFL draft talk. Okay, you want to come back because you can't make can't make an NFL roster, you know, without playing, for scouts to have film to evaluate you on. So,
Right.
like I said, there's just so many questions on the roster.
Tons of questions. And tons of questions that are on the roster of coaches because we don't know what's going to
Yes.
happen in the offseason, but this defense cannot continue to do this. You brought up Gerd talking about how if Larry Johnson's name wasn't Larry Johnson, would we not be throwing some shade his way, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's been 2 years and we haven't had a good defensive end in 2 years. Despite
Yes.
the fact that all highly recruited guys, very highly recruited, very top recruit guys, you're not seeing production from the defensive ends. That's Larry Johnson's purview also, not just the interior defensive line.
I agree. I mean, that's the thing. It's like, okay, he's approaching the end of what has been a terrific career.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I will always be grateful for, the fact that he helped to develop the Bosa's and Chase Young. But the reality is, as you said, the last 2 years, Ohio State has had a negligible outside pass rush. I mean, it just seems as though, the production just isn't there. I mean,
No.
and so I don't know. I mean, I know that it's one of these things that opposing teams have used against Ohio State in recruiting to say, like, well, Larry Johnson, he's going to be retiring soon. The reality
Mm-hmm.
is, I mean, he's getting closer to that anyway.
Sure.
So I think I'm not suggesting that that's, something that Ryan Day is going to want to encourage, but I think that's a conversation to be had with Larry Johnson. Like, how much longer are you going to be doing this when you're trying to figure out what the defensive staff is going to look like? I really don't know if Matt Barnes is going to be up for consideration for the defensive coordinator position, considering the fact that he was asked to take over the play calling duties after the second game of the season. Like, okay, what would you have done differently during like winter workouts and spring ball and fall camp and right? I just
Mm-hmm.
genuinely don't know.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, it's like, man, I mean, like, this defense has not been playing well the last couple of years, and Ryan Day can't stand pat. I mean, he just can't.
Nope. He can't. And I also would suggest that Ryan Day draw up the offensive game plan and turn over play calling duties.
I would agree with that too, because I think there's something to be said about his attention and focus. As the head coach, I think, now rumor has it. I mean, I like Kevin Wilson. I know was up for consideration for the vacant Akron job. Um, Kevin Wilson. I have complete confidence in Kevin Wilson as a play caller. I think that would be legit. I also know, like, Tony Alford, if the Colorado State job comes open, he might be I mean, there might be some significant turnover in that coaching staff, regardless of whether we're talking offensive or defensive.
Yeah. It's and that's why it's so hard to stay on top in college football, is because you have to deal with the constant turnover. If you're real successful, people will want your assistants to come and coach their teams. And if you're not, you're going to turn over the staff anyway on your own. So it's very difficult. But we'll have to see what happens in the offseason. I don't know if anything will happen before the bowl game, but it's possible. We've already seen some dominoes shift around the country. Chip, let's get to some of the other Ohio State news this week. Not a shock that Jack Miller has announced he is leaving Ohio State. The quarterback race ended up with him in third in the pecking order, and then he had the OVI arrest and got suspended from the team, and the OVI got dropped, I guess, and he
Yeah.
was reinstated. But it was never going to be a case of all of Stroud and Ewers and Miller and McCord all matriculating through Ohio State their entire careers.
Yeah, I wish him nothing but the best. I mean, it was one of these things where Jack Miller, when you look back on his recruitment, he was, not to say that Ryan Day never wanted him. I don't want to imply that, but he was more of a, okay, I think he committed more on the, he had, I think his family had an association with Urban Meyer, with his father, Jack Miller's father being the manager of the facility, out in Arizona whenever Ohio State would go out to play in the Fiesta Bowl. So I think that Jack Miller's love of Ohio State was more built around Urban Meyer. Obviously, Ryan Day, was going to honor that commitment, but I don't think it was completely coincidental that Jack Miller had some injuries in high school that he also offered C.J. Stroud in the same recruiting class. And then,
Mm-hmm.
when you look at now you have Kyle McCord, you have Quinn Ewers, the odd man out, as you said, was going to be more than likely Jack Miller. I wish him nothing but the best. I have no idea where he's going to go. I would suspect maybe closer to home. But he didn't take any nasty shots at Ohio State. And from what I've seen online, his teammates, I guess you could say now former teammates, have been all supportive and wishing him nothing but the best, and I'll do the same.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we of course wish him the best. And the thing is that is it was not always a foregone conclusion that Miller would be the odd man out, because
Right.
everything we heard out of camp even a year ago was that these guys are so close. Some
Mm-hmm.
days Miller would be ahead of McCord, and some days McCord would be ahead of Miller. We always knew that Ewers being added was going to put a lot of extra pressure on both Miller and McCord, and that of course has come to pass, and something's got to give. You got one quarterback on the field, you've got four good ones on the side, on the roster. Obviously, C.J. Stroud is your starter. I mean, and he has absolutely, in every way imaginable, proven that he's worth starting and proven that he's worthy of being the starting quarterback at Ohio State. There are still knuckleheads out there that don't like him and don't trust him, and I don't understand that. He had a couple bad games early in his, first few starts as a starter, and also with an injured shoulder. And once the shoulder got better, he's been fantastic.
Yeah. I mean, CJ Stroud, we mentioned this earlier. CJ Stroud is certainly not the problem. If anything, that's a bright spot offensively, regardless of whatever bowl game Ohio State winds up in, going into 2022, like CJ Stroud, he will be the face that adorns the national college football magazines on behalf of Ohio State.
Mm-hmm.
So
I think he'll finish second in the Heisman voting.
I think so. I think so. I mean, it if he had pulled out the victory against Michigan, I think it would be a foregone conclusion that he'd probably be the prohibitive favorite.
Yeah, I agree. Um, and if Auburn hadn't been stupid, I think he'd still be the favorite.
Yeah, I agree with that too. I was watching that game. I know what you're talking about.
Yeah. All right. So we wish Jack Miller luck. Not a surprise. He's the first one to leave, and you and I both talked about there may be a second out of that group that doesn't end their career as an Ohio State quarterback. So we'll see how it goes and go from there. Chip, anything else you want to talk about? Anything else we need to address?
No, I mean, this coming Saturday, I believe it or not, it's not that I'm some kind of a masochist. It's just because I love college football because it goes by so fast. I'm going to be watching not just the Big Ten championship Saturday night. I'll obviously be watching like the SEC championships on in the afternoon. Before that, the American Conference, which when it comes to Cincinnati, with Luke Fickell wishing the Bearcats good luck and hoping that they make it to the college football playoff.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll be watching that, and then on Sunday, we'll find out. In terms of it won't be, even though ESPN tries to make it into a big drama, it'll be like around 12 or 12:30, I would think that we'll know what bowl destination. So we'll have some different, strategies to talk about in terms of, whoever Ohio State draws as their bowl game opponent.
Yeah. All right. Only one thing that I wanted to talk, or not even talk about, just mention really, is that former Ohio State defensive back Malcolm Jenkins was named the Big Ten's Dungy Thompson Humanitarian Award winner.
Yeah, I saw that. Congratulations, well deserved. Malcolm Jenkins is certainly, in terms of, his not only his on the field play but his off the field contributions, certainly well deserved.
Exactly. All right, Chip, let us take a walk around the Big Ten scoreboard before we get out of here. The games this week started on Friday, the day after Thanksgiving. By the way, I hope you had a lovely Thanksgiving, Chip.
I did, and I hope you did as well.
Yeah, I ate a lot. And a lot. Once again, Chip, Nebraska decided to Nebraska, and Iowa wins 28-21 on the road at Nebraska, a game that Nebraska had very well in hand at a 21-6 score, and then everything bad happened all at once.
Yes, I was watching that, enjoying that on Black Friday, and I mean, again, I have sincere sympathy for Nebraska fans. I mean, just watching the destruction, it's certainly incomprehensible.
There was, it really kind of started maybe a little bit before this, but the blocked punt for the touchdown. You talk about ghosts, and you talk about wanting to put the pressure on Michigan and make them doubt themselves. As soon as that block punt for a touchdown happened, every Nebraska player went, "Here we go again."
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And they were still leading. They were still winning the game. They had a 21-9 lead in the fourth quarter of this game and lost 28-21. And as it would turn out, that was a very big, big comeback for Iowa. And we'll get to that. Penn State and Michigan State played. Michigan State bounces back from the butt kicking in Columbus, winning 30-27. And kudos to the Spartans for playing an invisible team.
Yeah, I mean, that was difficult to distinguish, where the, with the snow and the Nittany Lions white uniforms. I know exactly what you're talking about. It was very difficult to see.
Yeah, Penn State, you can go on Twitter and find any number of pictures from this game. And Penn State players in white pants, white shirts, white helmets, running around a football field covered in snow. You could not see them on film. You could see them on the TV screen a lot of the time.
Right. And again, as you said, give credit where credit is due for Michigan State, being able to handle the elements as well as you said, an invisible opponent.
Yes, Michigan State finishes 10-2 in the regular season, 7-2 in the Big Ten. And congratulations to Mel Tucker, who had a great season. Wisconsin went to Minnesota, going to fight for that Bunyan axe, Paul Bunyan axe. And Wisconsin had been playing like Wisconsin, decided to stop playing like Wisconsin and play like the Wisconsin from the first few weeks of the season, as the Badgers lose 23-13 at Minnesota, gave up some big plays. Not a great day for Graham Mertz. It was just Minnesota. You never know when they're good and when they're bad. They end up 8-4, 6-3 in the Big Ten, same record as Wisconsin. But Wisconsin came in as the number 14 team in the country. Minnesota was unranked, and again, you go back to rivalry games. And you go back to emotion, and Minnesota wanted this game more than Wisconsin did. Wisconsin was maybe thinking about Indianapolis.
I have no doubt Wisconsin was thinking about Indianapolis. And, congratulations, like you said, to PJ Fleck and Minnesota for showing up, because, I mean, they could have taken the easy way out, like, what does it matter? We're going to a bowl game. They played with more heart and fire, and, more than likely they're going to probably get a better bowl game result as a result of defeating Wisconsin in the rivalry game.
Yeah. In the bowl eligibility bowl, it was no contest, and Rutgers being at home did not matter because Maryland destroyed Rutgers and won 40-16. The game was pretty much out of reach early. It was 13-2 after the first quarter and 20-2 at halftime, and Rutgers was never a factor in this game. And it's a shame that Graciano took Rutgers so close to bowl eligibility and then lost the last two games of the season.
It is. I guess you could say that when you since you and I and everyone has seen both Maryland and Rutgers play. Like Maryland, the strength of their team is offense, and Rutgers is not. It's like Rutgers is more on the just solid defense and just solid play throughout. And I think Greg Schiano, I mean, he has nothing to hang his head in shame about, compared to where that program was a couple years ago, to have them go into the final game of the regular season, one game away from bowl eligibility. I think they're certainly going in the right direction, without a doubt.
Well, I blame Greg Schiano for not finishing the job against Michigan.
That's true.
Could have solved two problems right there.
There you go.
Was it the Land of Lincoln Trophy? Illinois and Northwestern?
Maybe. All I know, Illinois, yeah. I mean, Illinois, wasn't a surprise that Illinois took care of business against Northwestern.
The Lincoln hat? Is that the trophy? It's the Lincoln hat, right?
I think so. Something. Yeah, it sounds about right.
Somebody will let us know. But yeah, Illinois destroys Northwestern 47-14. Northwestern ends up 3-9, 1-8 in the Big Ten, and Illinois 5-7, 4-5 in Big Ten play. I think a much better showing for Brett Bielema in year one than we expected.
Easily. Again, it's like, Bielema, in terms of just the effort, the performance, everything from what I understand, recruiting wise, is pointing up for Illinois. And as for Northwestern, said it before, just going to reiterate it. I mean, you want to talk about a long off season. I mean, offensively, defensively, there's just so much that Northwestern needs to take care of. Pat Fitzgerald's going to have his hands full.
Yeah. And in the Old Oaken Bucket, I believe that's the trophy.
Yes.
Purdue and Indiana. And Purdue destroyed Indiana, 44-7. Indiana finishes 2-10 in overall, and 0-9. 0 for the Big Ten, Chip.
Yes, and the consequences of that have already started to be felt in Bloomington. I'm not sure if you saw, but Indiana, Tom Allen fired their offensive coordinator, Nick Sheridan. As of by and large, the house cleaning of assistants is begun. And as far as with Purdue, again, much better season than I think most people thought that they were going to have in 2021. So they'll get to go to a nice bowl season, but yeah, it's going to be a long off season for the Hoosiers.
Yeah, if I'm the offensive coordinator, I'm pointing to the other side of the scoreboard and saying, but your defense gave up 44, buddy.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, Purdue ends up 8-4, 6-3 in Big Ten play. So, with Wisconsin losing to Minnesota and Nebraska imploding on Friday, Iowa is your Big Ten West champion.
And obviously, I think the early betting line for the Big Ten championship, I may be mistaken, had Michigan favored by 10, maybe 10.5. And the one thing that I would guess watching the Wolverines is, it's like, they're gonna run the ball, but Iowa, I mean, they're not much offensively, but defensively they've been pretty good. So I think this is going to be, the kind of, old-fashioned Big Ten kind of game that you and I grew up watching. Even though it's going to be indoors, I think it's going to be, the potential for a low-scoring affair because of the defenses on both sides of the ball.
Yeah, I think it'll probably, like you said, I think it'll probably be low scoring. Everybody will be trying to run the ball. There'll be a lot of punts. It'll be a very Big Ten game.
Yes, it will be. Absolutely. But, for those people that are going, safe travels and hope you enjoy the game.
Yeah. Iowa, noteworthy, they were struggling early against Nebraska. They ended up bringing Spencer Petras into that game, so he has returned from his injury. So they have their starting quarterback back.
Yeah, and that's the thing is that it's going to be interesting to see. Iowa's offensive line has not necessarily, with the we talked about Ohio State's struggles. It's going to be interesting to see how Iowa's offensive line has had their struggles this season, how they're going to be able to handle that Michigan defensive line.
I suspect they'll be able to run better than Ohio State did, but
I do too. I think you're right.
All right, that is a wrap. The season's over, Chip, except for a bowl game. We've navigated the 2021 football season. Obviously, there's a lot more going on. I touched on earlier the stupidity of Auburn, and it was Auburn having a late touchdown lead on Alabama with the possession deep in, or not deep, but in Alabama territory, and their running back takes the ball around the edge, and when he met contact, he allowed himself to be pushed out of bounds, Chip.
Yep.
That saved 40 seconds for Alabama. Alabama tied that game with 24 seconds to play.
Yeah, I was watching it. We were our extended family was together, and I know exactly. My brother-in-law said the exact same thing. He's like, that kid should have just as soon as he was going around the side, he should have just fallen to the ground. And he would have, like you just said, like 40 seconds, that would have been the game, and, those kind of little things, like Auburn wound up, 6-6, like when it went into, like the, whatever, how many, 4 overtimes? What was the final tally?
I think it was three overtimes.
Okay.
Yeah, so the game goes into 3 overtimes, and that's the other thing, too, is that Auburn ran a really cool, each team scored a touchdown, each team kicked a field goal. Auburn then went for 2. No, I think you're right. It did go to 4 overtimes. Auburn ran that really good 2-point conversion play, and as Tom Orr pointed out, that really good 2-point conversion play, they could have pulled it out after their overtime touchdown and won the game.
Yeah. Again, Auburn, they're bowl eligible. They'll go somewhere, I don't know what bowl, but
yeah,
they'll have that, like they'll be forever, thinking like, oh God, we had them right where we wanted them in the Iron Bowl, and we let them off the hook.
They sure did. They sure did. If we've learned anything about the Iron Bowl, is you don't leave any extra seconds on the clock.
No, you do not. And
so
yeah. Auburn outplayed them most of the game too. That's the frustrating thing.
Yeah, Brian Harsin was visibly upset at his running back not getting to the ground and getting dragged out of bounds. It was that's tough for a coach because you've got this game won, and then so everybody will be talking about Bryce Young. Oh, Bryce Young brought him back down the field. The same Bryce Young that did not get his team ahead of 6-5 Auburn all day long is going to now get credit for this on his Heisman resume.
Well, like I said, I'm highly skeptical of. I think this coming Saturday, I think the Georgia Bulldogs might have something to say about the candidacy of Bryce Young.
Yeah.
But
I bet you a lot of people have already sent in their ballots, though.
I don't know. I think it's starting to change. Yeah. I think a lot of people are starting to wait till after the conference championships.
All right, we'll see. We'll see how it goes. And I don't know what will happen, but I suspect Bryce Young wins it and CJ finishes second. But it's a more open Heisman year than we've seen in recent years, pretty much.
Yeah, without a doubt.
All right, so you and I haven't talked about this. So this is an on-air how the sausage is made moment. My take on this is that you and I come back and preview whatever the bowl game is the week before the bowl game, do a wrap-up show after the bowl game, and that's our season.
And talk recruiting at that point, too?
Yeah, we could talk recruiting if you want. I don't really know a whole lot about it.
Well, no, I'm saying, like, by that time... By that time, the early signing periods in the middle of December, that'd be, like a great time to talk about it, like once they're officially signed. That'd be fine.
And there'll probably be some news. There may be some coaching news. If somebody's not going to be back, we may know before the bowl game. We may not. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I think it's a really good point.
Say, Chip, there's this guy named D'Antonio. Is he doing anything right now?
I think maybe just counting his money that he got, from Michigan State, but he's, as far as I know, he's available.
Do you think he'd like another seven-figure check from Ohio State University?
I would hope he would. I think it's worth a call. It's certainly worth a call.
I think that'd be my very first call, but that's just
Yeah,
me. And I'm
yeah.
not trying to disparage any of the coaches on the current staff. I'm just saying this guy has done it. He's done it in this league. He's done it for this school.
It'd be a worthwhile call. Make him
Yeah,
say no.
yeah, I think so. All right, we know the big thing though. The big thing is the recruiting. You gotta want to recruit, and you gotta want to recruit a lot. That's really it. And really, if you think about it, Chip, that's the only reason why you and I are not co-head coaches of the Ohio State University. We don't want to get out on the road and recruit.
That's the only reason.
Yeah,
That's the only reason.
we have all the answers.
There you go.
You wouldn't
There you
see
go.
us sitting Tyleek Williams in this game.
That's correct.
You
So
wouldn't see us sending Julian Fleming out there to return kickoffs after seeing what we saw.
yeah.
I'm
So
just saying that. All right. Well, it was. Look, I know everybody's bummed about the end of the season and the expectations that they had versus the reality. But the real reality is that we all live in a fantasy world. We expect this team to be one of the final four teams every single year. And that's not sustainable. Unless you're Alabama, it's not sustainable. And so we're all bummed. But by any real true measure of what is a good football season, Ohio State had a good football season.
they did. I mean, they didn't get to their final goals, which obviously, like defeating their rival, winning the Big Ten championship, all, those kind of things.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, you and I, we talked about being able to remember, it's like, we remember bowl games that, you know, were far from, like any kind of a luxurious, to me, like, when I think of, back in the 90s, some of the bowl game destinations, the fact that Ohio State, yeah, their consolation prize might be the Rose Bowl,
Yeah.
just speaks volumes about, where this program is in comparison to a lot of other teams, not only in the Big Ten, but around the country.
There's 100 schools out there that would love to have Ohio State's record
Yes,
this year.
absolutely. 10
And
wins, you got it.
yeah, exactly. So the last thing that I want for us to do, Chip, is to take a quick look back and see where we started, and that is with our preseason standings predictions and how they shook out. We both had in the West Wisconsin, Iowa, Minnesota, and it turned out to be Iowa, Minnesota, Wisconsin. So we were not far off there. There was one game separating those three teams.
Okay, that's not bad. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I I would say the Wisconsin and Iowa, I probably, looking back on it, probably felt more comfortable or confident than Minnesota. But the fact that the way that it did wind up, I mean, yeah, I don't think we were, like you said, I don't think we were that far off.
Mm-hmm. Our next group, I had Nebraska, Northwestern, Purdue. You had Northwestern, Nebraska, Purdue. We were underselling Purdue.
Very much so. And I'll say that I was overselling Northwestern based on my, thought that, Pat Fitzgerald, and I still hold him in high regard. But
Yeah.
obviously, like I said, Northwestern, they'll need a lot of work to get back up to where they were, last year and previous years.
Yeah, we both overvalued Northwestern. You a little bit more than me by one spot, but we didn't see a Big Ten team that led at halftime of the Big Ten championship game going 1-8 the next year in the conference.
No, not at all. Not at all.
And then Illinois at the bottom for both of us, and we undervalued Burt.
Yeah, I think the future looks bright. One, I think, you said 5-7. I'm sure that, getting to a bowl game will be, I don't want to say, um, like the only goal, but
Hmm.
I think it'll definitely be a achievable goal, for, the second year of the Bielema regime in Champaign.
All right, on the eastern side, we both had Ohio State, Penn State. We were both really wrong about Penn State. We missed Ohio State by one game. Uh, but Penn State went 4-5 in the league, Chip, and 7-5 overall. And James Franklin was rewarded with a 10-year extension.
Yeah, and here's the weird thing is that, we were just talking about Illinois. I think, if when you think about like the off season, because Penn State wound up 7-5, so their bowl game destination is not going to be that luxurious.
Mm-hmm.
I think that the question that James Franklin is going to have to kind of ponder this off season is, what if he had done, and he and his staff had done a better job of preparing the backups instead of playing Sean Clifford against Illinois? Like, what may, if the results may have wound up better for Penn State than 7-5.
Does Penn State lose Jahan Dotson this year?
Yes.
Yeah, that's tough. That's I had Thanksgiving. One of my extended family members is a Penn State guy. He's not sold on James Franklin as a coach. Loves him as a recruiter. Hates him as a coach. And I think the last two seasons don't speak of a guy who should have a 10-year extension given to him.
Yeah. That's it. I mean, and it's one of these things where as soon as that was announced, people started kind of looking it over and saying, oh, like the buyout isn't really that exorbitant. So I guess you could tell your family member, okay, it might not necessarily come to be 10
Right.
years or whatever. But yeah, I think there are a lot of Penn State fans who have similar mindset about James Franklin.
I had Michigan third, Chip, and then Indiana. You had Indiana and then Michigan. And I'm kind of blaming you for Saturday. You gave Jim Harbaugh bulletin board material.
Okay, I'll take that. I'll take that. Me and Greg Schiano, as you
Yeah.
referenced earlier.
Look at this.
In
Chip
terms
Minnich
of,
has us in fifth. What is
yeah,
going on here?
exactly. There you go.
Or
But
fourth.
yeah, I mean, I would have. I mean, credit to, in all sincerity, credit to Jim Harbaugh for, last year. I mean, a very poor year. Like there were. They completely restructured his contract. He went out, got new assistants. I was skeptical.
His brother gave him assistance. He said,
Well, but I'm just
John
saying,
said,
okay,
you're freaking inept. Here's some defensive coaches for you.
there you go. There you go. But I'm just saying, in terms of what he was able to do with considering the doubters and the naysayers of, all right, it didn't look like this team was going to be able to legitimately challenge for the Big Ten East, and they did. I mean, like they surpassed most people's expectations.
Yeah.
So the fact that they're going to be going to Indianapolis for the first time since the Big Ten went to divisions. Again, credit to Jim Harbaugh and the coaches and the players for pulling together and having a successful 2021 season.
Yes. Good job. Just proves the point that even a broken clock is right twice a day.
That's right. There you go.
All right. I gave Michigan State some props and put them in fifth out of the 7 teams. You had Maryland, Rutgers, Michigan State. I had Michigan State, Maryland, Rutgers, and it was indeed Maryland and then Rutgers. We were both whiffed on Indiana because they were terrible, and Michigan State surpassed both of us, but wildly surpassed what you thought that they would do. I mean, wildly surpassed what I thought they would do also, but at least I had some measure of they're on the right trajectory and they're lifting themselves up.
Oh yeah, and I don't know if you saw today. Credit to we were talking about the credit to Jim Harbaugh. Mel Tucker, the details of his 10-year extension were announced, and Mel Tucker was, he provided a clinic example of how you use that transfer portal, in terms of bringing in talent like Kenneth Walker, the third, and
Mm-hmm.
getting that team, far, far better than I ever could have possibly anticipated. Today, a player who was in the transfer portal from Wisconsin, Jalen Berger, who was a very good freshman running back a year ago, for whatever reason, for his departure from Wisconsin, it never really was fully explained. His non-use was never really, given by Paul Christ.
Mm-hmm.
But Michigan State, he announced his commitment to Michigan State. So it's like, all right, you might see, another running back carrying the ball and doing a good job for the Spartans in 2022.
Yeah. I know we talked about the game much more than I thought we would, considering how depressing it was. And not to extend an already long show, but since we're going to be off for a couple weeks here, I would say there's one other thing I would like to talk about before we go, and that's to get your opinion on Lincoln Riley bailing on Oklahoma as Oklahoma is getting ready to go into the SEC and taking the USC job. Now, the USC job is a great job, and you should be able to recruit there pretty easily. But recruiting's not been Oklahoma's problem, and with the SEC brand and the opportunity to win an SEC championship, you would think that would strengthen Oklahoma. But instead, he's off to USC in playing in a league where, yeah, it might be easier to win that league than the SEC, but it's also a much easier league to dismiss a one-loss team in than the SEC for sure, or even the Big 12 some years.
I think, I mean, I guess, Lincoln Riley, I mean, he's not going to come out and say this, because from what I have seen, just, like on ESPN.com and on Twitter, a lot of the talent that he has been luring or was on the verge of luring to Oklahoma was from Southern California. And so maybe in his mind, he kind of thought, okay, well, I can, like the talent there in California, I can get that. I have no idea in terms of like the dollar amount. Maybe he's looking at the potential of the expanded playoff that eventually, like, it could be announced, in the next month or so, whenever that comes to play, that, okay, you win the Pac-12, you get an automatic berth, that it might be an easier route for him to get a national championship with California talent that he might be able to lock down the majority of, versus going into the SEC, competing against Nick Saban, competing against LSU, competing against, all these other teams, and looking around the SEC, the fact that Dan Mullen was fired, Coach O was fired, that, okay, just the volatility of the SEC coaching ranks, maybe it's like, okay, the opportunity to, add a few more zeros to that bank account, keep the California talent at home, maybe an easier route to a national championship at USC.
Maybe. I personally don't think dollars had anything to do with it, because if USC waves a checkbook at you, I think Lincoln Riley has done enough where he could walk into the president's office and go, look at the check that USC just waved at me. What do you think about matching this?
Yeah.
And I think they would have done it. But there's reasons, obviously. I mean, maybe he wants to be the Dabo of the West Coast. I don't know. But my bigger question to you, Chip, is does he have to rename Boomer and Sooner his dogs?
I did not know that his dogs were named that. I would say yes. But again, I'm going to let Lincoln Riley have, they're his dogs. I wasn't aware of that. But yeah, I mean, it's been interesting to keep an eye on social media. Again, you and I, we don't really on the recruiting side, but I do know that it's been a flurry of decommitments from Oklahoma, as a result of this. And so, like, Bob Stoops is going to be the interim head coach. From what I understand, he's going out recruiting on behalf of Oklahoma. The rumor mill is in full effect. about who's going to be the next head coach. It's just going to bear watching because, between Oklahoma State, winning the Bedlam game, Baylor, what kind of direction Oklahoma goes to try and keep pace in the wake of Lincoln Riley's departure.
Yeah. Well, it'll be interesting to see if the one thing that we do know, and I don't know if the Boomer and Sooner thing about his dogs is true. I did read it on Twitter from somebody that actually should know, so or is at least credible enough to where I believe them. So we'll see, but history will show whether or not this was the right move for Lincoln Riley in the end, and
yeah,
it could turn out to be a fantastic move for him, or it could backfire spectacularly. Oklahoma could continue to be a national power and a nationally recognized brand and in a much better conference. And if you succeed in that conference, like I said, you're given the benefit of the doubt for a loss in that conference so much more than you are in the Pac-12. And even to the point where 2 losses doesn't take you out of the college football playoff race, because you say, well, it's just it's an SEC schedule, so it's tough. You don't get that in other conferences. You just don't.
Right. Yeah. I mean, like I said, I'm kind of anxious to see how it all shakes out with that expanded college football playoff. What direction the SEC as well as the Big Ten, what they decide to do in terms of scheduling. Like you said, because the final details are still being hammered out. But you're right. I think the SEC, it's more than likely you get more of the benefit of the doubt than in other conferences.
All right. Well, with that, we will table our discussion until you and I reconvene. We'll figure out who the what the bowl game is. We'll see what other news there is. But I say we reconvene the week prior to the bowl game. We'll preview the bowl matchup, and we'll talk about whatever other news there is to get to then. And then we'll, of course, come back and recap that. And I think that's our season. That will be our 2021 Silver Bullets podcast season. Beyond that, we haven't really discussed what our off-season plans for this upcoming off-season. We of course did our first off-season run last year, and then we ended up taking about a month off.
Yeah. Yeah.
But we'll have to see how it goes. You and I have had some discussions behind the scenes about the future of the Silver Bullets podcast, and we'll certainly get through this season, and we'll talk about the next steps.
Yep, absolutely.
All right, where can people find you on the internet, Chip?
I can be found on Twitter at Chip Minnich, last name spelled Minnich. And besides this podcast, I'm also an occasional contributor to Athlon Sports. Look for an article later this week previewing the upcoming Mid-American Conference Championship game between the Kent State Golden Flashes and the Northern Illinois Huskies.
Wow, it seems really interesting to me that Kent State is in that title game.
They had a barn burner of a game against Miami of Ohio in overtime.
They have really not. They've had some struggles in recent years, and it's good to see them have some success.
Yeah, they're a fun team to watch offensively.
I had a good buddy of mine from my childhood that went to Kent State, and he still lives up in that area, so I'm sure he's having a good time. All right, you can find me on Twitter at Mike36Fan. You can also find me on BuckeyeScoop.com as the grumpy old Buckeye. You can go back and read not all of the things that upset me and made me angry on Saturday, but who has the kind of time it would have taken me to write them all out. I just picked the ones that stuck out to me early, and then as the game went on, I got a little too frazzled to even write anymore. So it was one of those days. But thanks for checking out my stuff at BuckeyeScoop.com. Be sure you check out all the other. You don't have to check out all the other podcasts on Buckeye Scoop, but check out some of them and see what you like. Because who's got time to listen to all the podcasts?
I completely understand where you're coming from.
I wish I had more time to listen to podcasts.
Yeah,
but,
exactly.
You have to have a life sometime. But we have something for everybody, so you'll find something that you like on there. So go check it out, and we will see you the week before Ohio State's bowl game, right?
Yeah, that sounds like a good plan.
All right, there's nothing left for us to do but to swallow our tears. We haven't had too many in recent years, but we have some this week, and we'll still proudly pick up our heads, hold them high, and say, "Go Bucks!"
Go Bucks.